So let's move on to the second part. What is behind these developments? What makes that possible? First of all, the web has changed. I won't play the YouTube clip here, but I'll put the link online with the slides later. But the old days, for people from my generation and older, the internet was a place you went to retrieve information, and if you wanted to put information on the internet, you would really need to learn how to program. You need to learn how computers operate, how to push messages online, and so on. So the web, for most people, was really to retrieve information in the 80s. So the clip here talks about how newspapers made their newspaper available on the internet back then. And you really had a separate department who was coding the messages and making them available. And as a user, you could only go to dial into the newspaper office and retrieve that newspaper. So it was really a passive one. That has changed. Web technologies and developments in information and communication technologies made it possible that we can also contribute. So we call that Web 2.0. It's not only you as a passive consumer, but you can also create content. Think about things you put on social media, on Instagram, on Twitter. That allows you to contribute information. So these technologies make it easier for everyone to contribute information. And that has also changed from the old days where the tech people ruled the internet and at least the content of the internet. Now, content creators are not per se the tech people anymore. They could be the creative, could be businesses. So essentially anyone can now contribute. It's not only the techies anymore. It's not only organizations anymore, it's also the individuals. And there's a lot of tools available that allow you to do these things. So even if you're contributing in a Google Doc, it is you submitting information to the internet that you can share with. So I'll give you a minute to think about which tools there are to work online for each of them. And there's probably many more, but here are a few. So for spreadsheets, you can, like for a lot of them, you can use Google or Microsoft Office or Zoho. So there's a plurality of tools to be found online that allow people to contribute. Two more things about these evolving web capabilities. The first one is mashups. So mashups, because we now can contribute information, but technologies also allow us to combine information. So that allows us to make portals and combine information. So one of these examples is the dashboards that you see for the coronavirus. They pull in information from a variety of sources and present it to you as an integrated view. So essentially, a website is doing the same thing as a user could. So these developments have allowed websites and computers to also read other websites and pull information in. So I won't go into the technical details about this, but if you're interested, you can look up you could look up APIs, application programming interfaces, extended markup language, XML, JSON, and so on. So these technologies allow also websites to communicate and exchange information with each other. So not only individuals anymore, but also systems. And the second thing that is happening with this Web 2.0 is a network effect. So it means that because we're contributing information, a lot of these platforms are being formed that rely on a large number of users. So if you think about Reddit or social media, they get adopted because there is a critical mass. The same goes perhaps for within your organization. It's great if different tools are being introduced, but at some point, wherever the majority of people is going to, that's where the critical mass is going to be, and that's going to continue. So we call that the network effect. The effect of having a number of people on your platform, which makes it interesting for other people to join. And this is something, especially in these days when there's a lot of improvisation going on, to keep in mind, and where possible, to direct. Because you might have people joining different platforms at this point, people connecting with different tools. So over time, it will emerge or will gravitate to where its most users are. So that is the technology. Let's talk a little bit about the content. Because there's two kinds of knowledge that you could share. The first one is explicit knowledge. So explicit knowledge means knowledge that we can write down, that is easily documented. Think about data, think about procedures, software, documents, anything that is easily digitized, for example, or easily relayed, presented, and transformed. The other one is tacit knowledge, and that's a bit harder to grasp because it is subjective. It happens in our minds. These are skills, experiences, insights. These are much harder to capture in a digital system and to transfer. So as we go to these digital systems, we're working more on explicit knowledge and less on this tacit knowledge. I'll show you a bit of an example of the two. When we talk about explicit knowledge and generation and consumption, we call it, it's called combination. The reference to the paper from Polanyi is above. So for those kind of explicit to explicit, you can use automated systems. You can use these mashups that I refer to, intranets. Those are great places. So it's written communication, for example, in emails. It's something that's written down, it's something that's easily read. Tacit knowledge is a bit harder. It usually happens in social interactions, and that's why we call it socialization. It's when people meet face-to-face, when you have communities where people transfer values, transfer insights and knowledge. Something that's hard to capture. I mean, you can record a video like this, but it's still not the same as being in person discussing specific subjects. It's still, this is quite passive. But between the two, are interesting things happening. So internalization is explicit knowledge that you start using internally is tacit knowledge. So for example, the things I'm telling here, I'm making them explicit, I'm showing them on slides, I'll share them online later, they're in a video. However, if you want to act on it, you internalize that knowledge and you start applying it to your own situation. So that's online learning or stuff you find on the internet that you start using. Then there's the externalization, is actually something that is tacit and I'm making it more explicit. So it's actually the other side of the lecture. It is where I have knowledge in my mind and I'm trying to put it in slides, I'm trying to make it explicit. So it could be answering questions from somebody. Especially nowadays, you might have in your organization a lot of people who need some feedback. You know, they might ask a question and answering that. So it goes, you use your tacit knowledge to answer an explicit question. A great example of where these two really happen is Wikipedia, or any wiki, or intranet, or whatever system, knowledge management systems, we call them, you use. Because that's the place where, first of all, you are making your tacit knowledge explicit, what you know, how do you make sure that other people can read it. So think about manuals, tips, tricks. But you can also look at it as a place where you can find the information that is explicit and start using it for your own situations. So best practices. I'll give you one great example, and I was chatting with them last night. It's a coronavirustechhandbook.com. So it's a set of Google documents that is being crowdsourced, which means people are collaborating on it online. And in these documents, you can find tips, tricks for various situations on how to work remotely and how to work online. So one of the handbooks they're working on is a handbook for online education. So people are contributing knowledge that they have, their tacit knowledge, making it explicit using these Web 2.0 technologies, and other people can access it and start using it, start accessing this explicit knowledge and start using it. So that transformation from tacit to explicit and back to tacit is becoming more and more important these days, because before tacit knowledge to tacit knowledge is something that happens more in social interactions. So this Coronavirus Tech Handbook is a great resource, and you can contribute to it with your ideas and you can learn from others. So this is the current status of the internet and the technologies, but there are more developments going on. So there is the developments of the semantic web, which means that computers and systems will be even better in understanding what exactly is that each website, application, system holds, and be able to understand the context of it. So computers could understand what is there, and machines could talk to machines and learn from each other. So it allows you to better find the information. And then the Web 3.0 is actually a different, is a development that's going on already, where you center around accessing information in a way that suits you. So at the location with the relevant information in a manner that's easily accessible. It doesn't have to be your phone, that doesn't have to be a browser. It could be, in devices that alert you or something. It could be in other Internet of Things applications. So it will be less visible, more integrated into devices, and more integrated into our daily life. So there are a few examples of that already, but I won't go into the technical details yet. Just saying that there's more developments coming that, further make the distinction between our physical, going online, retrieving information, and our tasks will become smaller and smaller. That gap, they will become more integrated, and that gap will become less visible, tangible, feelable.